Welcome, everyone, to Indications and Warnings with Chuck Pfarrer, co-produced by Alan Brewer. Chuck and I are recording this broadcast of Indications and Warnings on November 17, 2025. It's day 1363 of Russia's full-scale genocidal invasion of Ukraine. Where I am, Chuck, it's approaching overnight hours, so it's almost day 1364. It's almost November 18. As we are recording this show, I can report that the Ukrainian city of Dnipro is actually under massive drone attack. We're going to look at the zero line. We're going to consider what is approaching now 11 years of war. Viewers should remember that this war started in 2014 with the annexation of Crimea and the creation of these fake breakaway people's republics in Luhansk and Donetsk. So we'll be taking a bird's eye view at this point in time of the war. And Chuck and I want to invite all of our viewers, all of our subscribers, old and new, to share this show if you find the broadcast valuable, to join in the conversation, because as much as possible, Chuck and I try to answer questions that you ask in the comments. So we encourage you to make those comments. And if you come across a Russian troll in the comments section of Indications and Warnings, take a moment and bonk them. They're pretty obvious. Chuck and I deal with them as we can. Mostly they amuse us, Chuck.
They are amusing. There for a while, I was screen grabbing their Twitter header and pointing out that they had 2 followers and would they please just talk to them instead. So anyway, it's fun bonking those guys. That's, hey, that's up to you. But we really want to thank everyone for listening. We're getting to a point where we're getting, thousands of views now. Thank you. We appreciate that so much. Hey, our show is free. Please do join us. We are a long form broadcast and we're perfect for getting on the exercise bike or taking a walk. So thank you for joining us.
And we will begin this broadcast with a bird's eye view of what's happening. What is the state of the war between Russia and Ukraine? What is the state of Russia's genocidal invasion of Ukraine? And just off the top of my head, Chuck, one of the things that strikes me that has changed in 2025 is the long-range war that Russia and Ukraine wage against one another for so many years, 2022, 2023, 2024. The advantage was all Russia's. They launched a terror campaign against Ukrainian civilians in Ukrainian cities. It continues today. 2025 has been the most lethal year for Ukrainian civilians living almost anywhere in Ukraine. But what has changed is Ukraine's development of its own long-range missiles, the latest being the Flamingo. It's already been used. Now, night after night, both Ukraine and Russia are launching these long-range strategic attacks. Well, Ukraine's attacks are strategic. Russia's attacks continue to be terror strikes against Ukrainian civilians.
That is really the issue, and it is telling now. We've been enduring this for the last 3.5 years. Alan and I reported from Kharkiv, right from a particular building that was hit by 6 shaheeds rather. What is the point of that?
Chuck and I are in Kharkiv at the site of a devastating Russian attack just a few weeks ago, 5 Shahed drones, a ballistic missile aimed at a residential apartment complex. Hundreds of people had to find new homes after this Russian strike. 5 were killed, Chuck, at least 17 injured.
We spoke to the first responders just moments ago who told us, even in their experience, this is one of the most vicious attacks they had ever seen. And again, to underscore, 6 Shahed drones were targeted on this civilian apartment building. And in the time that the first responders were rolling, the Russians hit it again with a ballistic missile. So you can see the damage that was done here. Walking up, little child's play bucket, somebody's notepad, little pieces of furniture, the broken bits of a family and the life. And we know from what we were told and what we saw with our own eyes that the casualties were horrendous.
In a way, you have to know where to look to find this kind of a destruction, but throughout Ukraine, and we've driven now from Lviv to Odessa, through Pavlograd, through Slovyansk, through Izum, now to Kharkiv. You do pass a lot of destruction. It's not building after building after building. It seems isolated, especially when you're on the country roads. And the expanse of Ukraine is an expanse of sunflower fields. But when you come across something like this, it brings home what the Russians are trying to do to Ukraine, to terrorize ordinary Ukrainians, literally sleeping in their beds, hoping for a calm night, a peaceful night, a silent night, and it never, ever comes.
We reported on this story on Indications and Warnings a couple of weeks ago when it happened, but to be standing on the scene and just moments ago speaking with the first responders who responded to this building, rescuing who they could and recovering what they could, it's very sobering. I'd just like to remind everyone, this bit of random tragedy is deliberately created by the Russians. This apartment building was selected out of dozens here in this area, apparently at random, and the Russians were trying to send a message to Ukraine. But it's a message that Ukraine isn't going to hear. They are not going to surrender, and their will is not going to be broken.
And by the way, we should mention this Russian terror attack occurred after a window for negotiations had been opened, or hopefully opened. And this is the Russian message, not only to Ukraine, but to the world that hopes for peace in Ukraine, for the world that supports Ukraine. It's also the message to Donald Trump. Maybe Donald Trump should begin to ask himself, can you really negotiate with this?
Mr. Witkoff, just take a look at this. Imagine if those were your family's possessions, your children's toys, your kids' schoolwork. It's all buried here, and it's a monument to Ukrainian resilience, not defeat.
You know, it was a civilian building. We went through the wreckage. We went floor to floor. There was not a trace of a military anything there. It's a civilian building. But what we're seeing, and as we report today, I'm looking at 3 targets within Russia that are at least 1,500 miles, 1,500 kilometers rather, from the Ukrainian frontier. What we've also seen is, Russia hitting these civilian targets, maybe gratuitously violent. I don't know what the strategic aim in that was, but we have seen Ukraine using its precious long-range precision strikes to hit very important targets, bottlenecks in the industrial military complex. As we know, the recent campaign against oil refineries, it has expanded now again in response to Russian attacks on power grids within Russia. But critically, Russia operates by sending volumes of drones and missiles together. Ukraine treats each strategic target like its own air battle. The first things that arrive are often short range FPV drones launched by people in proximity to the target to blind Russian air defense. Then it's followed by increasingly more capable drones. So the last thing to hit is a Flamingo or a Storm Shadow or, a long Neptune. And that's paying big dividends, Alan.
It's paying big dividends not only in Ukraine's strategic war against Russia's refining capacity. There are various estimates out there that refining capacity and therefore the profit to fuel Putin's war machine has been cut by 30%, maybe 40%, maybe as much as 45%, because Ukraine does not stop with a single hit on a single refinery. It continues until they finish the job. So the Saratov refinery, for example, another distant target inside Russia, has been struck at least 3 times. Half of Russia's refineries have been struck at least once. And now, today, we see reports from Russia's large oil companies, profit collapsing year over year. Gazprom down 65%. And now Russian crude selling at the lowest price since 2023. This all spells trouble for Putin's war economy.
It really does. And again, one of the amazing things, we keep hitting on this, but it's never occurred in history. Ukraine has no strategic aviation capability. They don't have any bombers per se, but they have had a major effect on Russia's economy, mostly with indigenously produced weapons. Yeah, we're talking about giving them harpoons, but in the meantime, they come up with a Flamingo. We're talking about giving them some anti-ship capability, but they have taken the Neptune, which was a Russian copy of the Harpoon, and they've put it on steroids. And the other benefit of this, by playing their cards so well, by playing the long game, every Ukrainian strike is also designed to diminish Russian air defenses. And they are down in net capability more than 50%. And key systems like the Pantsir and the S-400, look, those can't be produced by Russia, although they claim to produce 30 S-400s a month. Santa Claus is going to give me one too. But they have knocked these things down by 50%. This means if you are Putin, and try to imagine being that shriveled dwarf for just a second, he has to think about, what am I going to do with half the poker chips I had at the beginning of this game, and my enemy is expanding attacks? How can I protect everything? Well, to our Russian listening guests, you can't, as we say down here.
You can protect your palace in Sochi, but you cannot protect your refineries in Saratov. And you cannot protect your oil export ports in the Black Sea or in the Baltic. So using Flamingo missiles, I believe, Ukraine has taken offline Tuapse, a small oil export base in the Black Sea, and right next door, the larger port of Novorossiysk, maybe offline for just a couple of days. Reports today are that in Novorossiysk, they have resumed loading crude oil for export. But hey, it just means Ukraine's going to strike it again.
Well, we also look what's happening here, and this move hasn't been made yet. But imagine you are Lloyd's of London, and I have this dodgy 40-year-old very large crude carrier, and I want to take it into Novorossiysk to get a load of crude. And where are you going to get insurance? So I've been talking about this for a while. I'm still amazed it hasn't happened. But in the near future, an Exxon Valdez sized shadow tanker is going to have an accident because they don't have qualified crewmen, they don't have insurance, they don't have the appropriate gear to deal immediately with one of these accidents, and there's going to be a big problem. We do know the way Russia handles environmental accidents. The last time they had an oil spill, they said it was 1/10 the size of its actual size, and the Irish and the Ukraine and the UK government said, we're right here looking at it, right? It's 10 times bigger than you're reporting.
Well, Russia can look at a blue sky and call it gray, can look at a storm sky and call it blue. And there have already been environmental disasters, oil spills in the Sea of Azov, and beaches on the coast of Ukraine, actually in Odessa, that have been spoiled by oil. So just back to the bird's eye view for a moment. When I think of the long-range strategic war that Ukraine has been waging, they are more free today to wage it with their own domestically produced weapons. They are no longer under restrictions that the Biden administration put them under when they were given the first long-range missiles, not that long range, the ATACMS. But they are under no restraint. They can choose their own targets, prosecute them as they wish. I've always believed that Ukraine was winning this long-range strategic war. I think they are winning it decisively in 2025 and will win it even more decisively in 2026. If you compare that to what's happening on the zero line, every time Putin announces a new deadline for a victory, by the way, Pokrovsk was supposed to have been occupied by November 15. I think Putin has a new deadline in mind. But every time he announces a deadline, I'm reminded by his original deadline for the 3-day special military operation. In 3 days, Russia will be in Kyiv. He should stop talking about deadlines.
Yeah, I think that there is a deadline coming for Russia, and that will be when it's no longer able to prosecute its war aims in Ukraine. But let's pull back up to an orbital view here. We have a regional war. It's been going on for, like Alan said, 10 or 11 years now. Regional wars usually go between 8 and 15 years. Okay, I'm still a long war guy, but I do want to say this. Russia is not going to be able to achieve its strategic aims in Ukraine, categorically, right? We talk about Pokrovsk or a village falling here or the fall of Velika Novosilka, and all of that is true, and we report on the minutia of this war. However, Russia is never going to conquer Ukraine. We've done the math with Dr. Jason Smart. At the present rate of advance, it will take them 103 years to get to Lviv, and it'll cost Russia 30.2 million casualties. Okay, so they're never going to subdue Ukraine. Alan and I talk about Russia not running out of manpower, but running out of army. Okay, they're running out of air defense. They're running out of artillery pieces. They're running out of ammunition, right? When you got to buy crap from North Korea, you are a hurting unit, dude. Because the good thing about North Korean stuff is it's made in North Korea. So the big house is not going to fall. Something's going to fall here. And I'm afraid it's someone who started this war out as a superpower.
Right. Who wasn't a superpower when they started the war. It just wasn't obvious to the rest of the world. Speaking about North Korea, ammunition supply, artillery shells. North Korea has supplied Russia with somewhere between 50% and 75% of all the artillery shells they have needed on the front line. The intensity of this war has been so great that now Russia is actually depleting North Korea's supply of artillery shells, and North Korea is no longer able to supply that number of shells to Russia. And I think we are going to see that deficiency have a real effect early in 2026.
We absolutely are. I'm looking at the live view map right now, and folks use that as a reference. Absolutely, it's one of the gold standard. Well, I wouldn't call it gold standard, but I'd say it's a sterling silver grade resource. You got to check it sometimes. But massive. You can't go more than 20 kilometers anywhere on the zero line from the Dnipro up to Kupiansk without there being a contact point. This is one of the highest tempo offensive periods that Alan and I have seen in the whole war. But man, that burns up gas. It burns up equipment. It burns up artillery ammunition. It even burns up small arms ammunition. How much longer can Russia keep this up? I don't know. But I can tell you, the guy who's driving the locomotive, he's not looking back in the coal box. He's not looking back to see if anyone's still following him. And we're entering that point that I think I can finally say it. It's the law of diminishing returns. And I'm dead serious about this one. This is a non-win for Russia. It's as unwinnable as Vietnam was for the United States and Afghanistan. It's unwinnable. We were in Afghanistan for 20 years. I reported from Afghanistan. What changed? Nada. Nothing. Except we created a regional superpower by leaving all our toys behind. But this isn't going to be a win for Russia.
It's not. I think in a way they actually lost the war 4 years ago. It's just going to take a decade for that loss to be recorded in the history books. It may take longer than a decade, frankly. What else do we see with a quick bird's eye view down on the state of the war? I guess the other thing I would mention, one thing that has not changed, Russian mass versus Ukrainian brains. But one thing about Ukrainian innovation, it has struck me that it's always mission specific. In other words, they look at the tools in their toolbox and they look at the job they want to accomplish. If they lack the tool, they'll create the tool. I think it's especially true with unmanned sea vehicles, the sea babies. I think it's especially true with the heavy lift drones that Ukraine has excelled at designing and producing. It has also excelled at producing the first ground combat robots. And these are used in two ways: in combat and to evacuate wounded Ukrainian soldiers. But my point is, Ukraine looks at the tools it has. If it lacks one, it creates one.
And Ukraine is not burdened with the labyrinth of conflicting interests, big money, entrenched industrial partners. Because look, I've done projects for DARPA. I've been through that. I was a Beltway bandit for a while. I was selling my big ideas to DARPA. And I've mentioned this a million times. If you came in with a Mavic drone and a mortar shell 4 years ago and said to DARPA, look, we make thousands of these and we rain down precision fires on the enemy, goodbye. We've got Raytheon, kid. They can do that for $250,000 a missile. We don't need you. But Ukraine is like, go. Good idea, kid. Get on it. When can you start producing them? And that has worked out for them incredibly. 4 years ago, there were unmanned surface and submarine vessels in the United States Navy. I'll tell you that. They were deeply classified, and virtually all of them were strictly for reconnaissance. And they were this oddball, okay, you got one of those. They were these gizmos. If you had told an admiral 4 years ago, the Russian Black Sea Fleet, one of the principal organizations of the Soviet/Russian Navy, that it would be swept from the Black Sea, nobody would have believed you. Now the Moskva's on the bottom, right? Nobody, that the Moskva who used to hunt carrier battle groups in the Med, on the bottom. That strategy, Alan, has worked out for Ukraine just amazingly.
It has, and it's been worked up to scale. In 2026, Ukraine will be able to produce 20 million drones. Some people might wonder about the mission-specific innovation of Ukraine. Why hasn't Ukraine focused on air defense, which has been a need from the very beginning? I want to remind folks, Ukraine has focused on air defense. Ukraine is now able to deploy 1,000 air defense drones specifically designed to intercept incoming Shahed drones. That's 1,000 interceptor drones a day. So this is about innovation. It is about scale. How do those interceptor drones work? By the way, they are reusable and they work kinetically at high speed. They can overtake the incoming Garan or Shahed Russian drone before it hits a target in a Ukrainian city, take it out of the sky or off course, be retrieved, be returned to base and used again.
Yeah, it was about 2.5 years ago. I did an infographic on a unique drone called the Andril Anvil. And it was it has since evolved, but it was kind of this wedge-shaped mass with propellers on it. And I put it on there as, isn't this interesting? Not knowing this was another debut of an out-of-the-box weapon system that is now universally adopted by Ukraine. And I want to say that Ukraine needs everything, and especially air defense. But, they're not laying down here. They've adapted some of their own Buk ex-Soviet anti-aircraft systems to fire Sparrow missiles. They've mounted sidewinders on unmanned surface vessels. They've put them in the back of a pickup truck, turn the heater on and listen to the tone and let it go. That's not as easy as it sounds, right? You've got to interrogate the missile and the seeker and just all kinds of things. But again, we circled right back to, what are the Russian targets? Well, we've seen them. They're apartment buildings, right? They can't find you legitimate Ukrainian military targets because Ukraine is so good about dispersing their assets, and the negative consequence of that is, well, how do you disperse all your logistics? How do you get them together? Well, you've got somebody in Ukraine thinking like FedEx. When it's absolutely got to be there overnight, they get it there. But that is a logistical network. It takes brains to do that. Now, I'm not saying our Russian listening guests don't have brains. Someone's transcribing this right now, but that is why you see gigantic Russian kabooms, because they can't disperse their ammunition. They put it together in thermonuclear quantities, and Ukraine's very good at finding it.
Yep. And we'll get to some of the tip-offs later in the show. Don't worry, viewers. It's something the Russians have already figured out. Zelensky was in France today, meeting with Emmanuel Macron, and important agreements were signed, including a finalization of the sale Rafale jets to Ukraine. This comes together with the sale of Gripen jets from Sweden to Ukraine, as well as SAMP-T air defense systems from France. All of this will benefit Ukraine in the future. But what has always concerned me, Chuck, is what Ukraine needs now really has not changed. And Ukraine's allies have been inconsistent in delivering what Ukraine needs now. This has really been the instigation for Ukraine to develop its own systems it can use at its own discretion. And frankly, they are more reliable. And certainly, they come to Ukraine with fewer headaches. There's no worry about when the delivery will come or if it will come. It's designed in Ukraine. It's manufactured in Ukraine. It's deployed from Ukraine. I think the Flamingo missile is probably the most recent best example, now being produced at scale, 7 Flamingo missiles a day.
That is wonderful. And believe me, they're all going to get put in the air that night. And again, every Flamingo comes with a whole strike package of other drones, decoys, electronic warfare. One drone following the Flamingo will break high to film the impact. So, and that's really the 95% solution for Ukraine to use the air to project power. And look, I congratulate Sweden, I congratulate France. Ukraine needs those airplanes, but of all the services, building an air force is a generational endeavor, right? You can give somebody 100, 200, 300 Super Hornets, but to mature that capability, right? There's at least 100 technicians to back up one fighter pilot. And being a fighter pilot, look, it's at least as hard as playing the cello, right? Okay, you start as a kid with interest, you pick up, and in high school, if you got a lot of talent, you go to Juilliard, meaning Top Gun. But to be a completely mature fighter pilot at the height of your powers, 2 years of basic instruction in the aircraft, and look, I'll just say what I know from naval aviation, 4 years in the fleet before you're a flight lead. So look, 6 years. It's about the same thing to be a SEAL platoon commander. In about 6 years, you're ready to do it. So look, Ukraine needs those. A really credible Ukrainian Air Force will continue to be a deterrent to its perennial adversary, which is Russia. But, I'm very glad to see that progress made. And France has been sending some serious messages to Russia.
Yeah. Via Ukraine, which is the most reliable messenger for delivering a message to Vladimir Putin.